Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome to another DxO webinar. I'm your host, Photo Joseph, and today's webinar is all about PhotoLab 5 Essentials, which is included with the Nik Collection. Nik Collection 5, that is. So if you haven't upgraded, it right there is just worth the price of admission. Upgrading or getting Nik Collection 5 will get you that full version of PhotoLab 5 Essentials. So today what we're going to do is dive into what PhotoLab 5 Essentials is. At the end, I'll show you how it integrates with the Nik Collection, just in case you're not familiar with that, but we are focusing 99% on PhotoLab itself here. And then at the very end, I'm going to show you the differences between PhotoLab 5 Essentials and PhotoLab 5 Elite, which you can upgrade to. And there's information on how to do that on the website, because of course the Elite edition does have additional features. But just to do a quick little intro to what we're going to be talking about today. First of all, again, I'm Photo Joseph. Greetings. Down at the bottom there, you'll see a URL, photojoseph.com/getDxO. If you decide to upgrade or make a purchase after today's webinar, I would most certainly appreciate you using that link. That's very handy, helps all of us. Just again, to reiterate that PhotoLab 5 Essential is included with the Nik Collection. So this is a really nice part of this, this upgrade to Nik 5, granting you access to that. And the big thing about this is it is a lifetime license. So you do not need to pay a monthly fee. There's no subscription service. If you're trying to get out of the subscription model, this is a great way to consider it. And of course, in today's presentation, you're going to see just the tip of the iceberg of what you can do in here. But I do want to show you some of the cool features that are in here and some of the big advantages of PhotoLab 5. Specifically, what we're going to be covering here are starting off with the optics modules, which is kind of the cornerstone of everything that makes not just PhotoLab, but basically all DxO products that process raw files. It's what makes them unique. As you are probably aware, when you're talking about a raw processing application, whether you're talking about PhotoLab or Capture One or Apple Photos or of course Photoshop, Lightroom, that sort of thing, every one of them has their own raw processing process. Think of it like the recipe. The ingredients, the raw ingredients, are your raw photos. Just like in the kitchen, your raw ingredients for chocolate chip cookies or the flour and the bubble and the bits and the eggs and the chips and all that stuff. How you put those together is up to the chef. Well, just like with photography, with raw photos, how those raw ingredients from that raw photo is processed into pixels on your screen is up to the chef. And in this case, the chef is the software. So each app will process those photos a little bit differently, and each app is struggling to make theirs better than everybody else's. And so in today's presentation, what you're going to see is some of the advantages of the DxO engine and specifically the DxO optics modules and how all that ties together. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we dive through it. We're going to talk about organizing your photos in PhotoLab, how that works within the photo library in there. We'll talk just a little bit of feature stuff. We're going to go into some of the color control just because it's pretty awesome what you can do inside of PhotoLab. We'll talk a little bit about repairing, just show you the retouching control tools that we have in here. And then of course, show how to get those photos into the Nik Collection and how you go back and forth and edit and re-edit your photos and so on. So that is the agenda for today. With that said, let's get this thing started. So this is PhotoLab 5. I'm going to drop into my collection of photos, which I just realized I removed the favorite so I could show you how to add a favorite, and in doing so, completely lost my place. Brilliant start to the day. So where are we? Let's find the right folder here. Let's see here. Clients and jobs, there we go. DxO webinars, and here is the one photos. There she is. So we'll come back into why do I keep trying to say organizations? We'll come back to organizing later, but today we're going to start by looking at the DxO optics modules. I'm going to close my window, my camera here while we are, oops, sorry, that we don't need that quite yet, while we are doing the demos. And then if you have questions throughout, just go ahead and drop them into the Q&A, and those are going to show up on a separate window on my screen so that I can take a look at the questions you've got. So please do bring those in as you like. They're going to be aggregated and brought up for me. All right, let's get started with the modules. So as I was kind of inferring, there is this thing called optics modules, which is a key component to working within PhotoLab. And you'll see this menu up here called DxO optics modules. And honestly, you probably never even have to go in here. Everything happens automatically as you need it, but I want to show you what's actually happening and how you can get to the modules. So even before I dive into showing that, let me just back out again for a moment, turn on the camera and explain what a module is. So an optics module is a little tiny piece of software, a little tiny bit of code that is unique not just to a camera, not just to a lens, but to a camera and lens combination. Most apps take an approach where there's a module for that lens. So your Canon 2470 f2.8, whatever, that lens, there's a module for that. The thing is that that lens will interact differently on different cameras. If you're talking Canon cameras and that Canon lens, if you put it on a Canon 5D Mark III or a 1DX or any of the other Canon models that are out there, you will get slightly different results. So the software, the optics modules in PhotoLab are actually a module per combination. So there's been this calibration that has happened in the DxO labs, literally in their labs in France, where they go through and they do this meticulous process of analyzing very scientifically and also creatively. They're looking for color, kind of creative influences, I suppose you could say, of the image, of the lens, creative characteristics, but it is largely technical, looking for technical characteristics, chromatic aberrations, distortions, vignetting, things like the sharpness, things like that, but not just blanket applying it to that lens, testing it with a lens and body combination and coming up with a final result to give you the cleanest possible image. So there are thousands upon thousands of these modules. And no, there is not a module for every single possible camera and lens combination in the world. That's untenable, but there is certainly for the vast majority and absolutely for the vast majority of popular, well-known cameras and lenses. So before you even dive into your photos, if you wanted to just see where these modules live and what modules are available, or if, for example, you want to see if the cameras and lenses that you personally shoot with are supported before you make a purchase, you can do that. So here's where you can do that. Let me turn the camera back off and let's go back into that DxO Optics module menu. And you see that there's a download missing, manage optics modules. That's going to show me the ones I've already downloaded. Then there's a DxO Optics modules roadmap. So what we can do in here, let's just jump into this. It's going to open up a web page, which is on another window. Here we go. And it opens up this website, which the URL, if you just wanted to go there directly, is dxo.com/supported cameras. And from here, you can choose your equipment type, camera bodies or lenses. So let's do a camera body search. And then I can go, well, what brand? What brand do I shoot with? I shoot mostly with Panasonic. So let's go to Panasonic. What model? I can scroll through here, or I can just start to type it. So I'll type S5 because I shoot with the S5 a lot. So there's a couple matches in there. The S5, that's the one that I want. So I select that, and it shows me Panasonic S5, PhotoLab, raw support. Strange way that's combined there, but raw support's got a check mark, so there we go. So the body itself is supported, but now what lenses are supported with it? Well, right here, see the list of lenses. So I click that, and now you can see page upon page of different camera and lens combinations that are supported in here. So it's an immense list in here. So you really can narrow this down to figure out exactly if your particular camera and lens is supported. Now, if it's not, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't use the app. What it will mean, though, is that you may not get all the best optical corrections and so on that will apply to that. Okay, so with that in mind, oh, and also I should point out here, if yours is missing, if you don't see the module you want, there is a suggest optics module option, and you can get to there from that same website. So if I go back to Safari, if we scroll down to the bottom, you say, is your hardware not supported? Get in touch. And this link here will take you to this page where you can say, oh, I want a camera lens or body supported. So you type that in, type in the model and your email address and send it off, and they will let you know if and when that is added. So that is how that works. Okay, so with that in mind, where do the optics modules come from? So the app does not have all of them installed by default. That would be a huge number. There's no point in doing that. They actually download on demand. If I go to this manage list, this will show me all the ones that are available. But if I click on this show only installed ones, it'll show me the ones that I have in here. So this particular photo right here was shot with, no, I've forgotten, I think, let's see here, let me go back to customize tab. And that was shot with, here we go, a Canon 5D and the 14mm lens. So I'm going to delete the optics module that is used for this photo. So let's go back into manage, and I said it was the 5D, and there it is. So there's the module for this particular photo, Canon EOS 5D plus the 14mm f2.8 lens. Click remove, it removes that. And right away, you'll see there's this little icon down here telling me that there's an optics module that needs to be downloaded. Now, at this point, if I click on it, it's not going to prompt me, but if I relaunch the app, it would prompt me and say, hey, this one's missing. Do you want to download it? And what the dialog would look like is this right here. So it says an optics module has been found. There's that same one, 5D plus the 14. Do I want to download it? Click on download, and it's a tiny file. It downloads that, and we're done. So that is now applied, that's been applied to that photo. So what is it actually doing to the photo, and what would it look like if we didn't have it? Well, let's go now to the different corrections. So over here on the right-hand side, you have a list of all the corrections that you can apply to your photo. We're certainly not going to be diving into all of these. If I turn off this filtering up here, you'll see every single one of them just laid out in kind of a flat list. But then these filters here allow me to see modules based off of certain categories. So this is a detail category, that's color, that's light category, and so on. And if I'm looking under the, let's see here, so a geometry category, we'll see this one here called distortion. Distortion correction is based on the DxO module because there is a DxO module, so it's based off of that. Well, if I turn that off, what's going to happen to the image here? We get that to refresh. There we go. You'll see, you might have noticed as I toggle that, I'm going to just kind of keep toggling it back and forth so you can see the difference there. You'll see that there is a devignetting happening. And more importantly, on this image, you're seeing a distortion correction. So as I turn that off, you'll see that the image has kind of pinched in a little bit. There's a little bit of curvature around the edges here, but this has fixed it. Now I can actually do a compare up here. There's a compare button, but if I just do the compare right now, we're not seeing the distortion correction. We're seeing a comparison of all the other works, the devignetting and whatever auto exposure has been applied. But if I go to this little menu here, I can say, you know what, show it to me without the geometry corrections when I view no corrections. So that means now when I compare, now we're seeing everything. So we're seeing the kind of true unadulterated raw photo in here without any of PhotoLab's own secret sauce applied to it. And then as I let go of that, you'll see how that is corrected. So we're seeing, again, the devignetting, I should say. We're seeing a brightening of the shadows. And, you know, creatively, you might decide that you want to make those darker, and that's fine. But this allows me to get this kind of auto rendering applied to it. And of course, you're seeing that distortion being cleared out. So that is one part of what the optics modules are doing. It is that whole lens distortion correction. Another really big one is chromatic aberration. So I'm going to go to another photo here. And for this photo, when it's zoomed out, you can kind of see around the edges in here, maybe there's a little bit of chromatic aberration, but let's go ahead and zoom in to 100% on this photo. Actually, I'm going to zoom in even farther. Let's go up to 200. We'll go even bigger. Let's just keep zooming in there. And around the edges in here, right now, the aberration appears to have disappeared. Well, that's because we're looking at it 100 or beyond 100%, which is where the true chromatic aberration removal gets applied. So we're really seeing the final image at this stage once we zoom in or past 100%. But let's turn off that chromatic aberration. So chromatic aberration correction, I should say. So that is here under this category called detail. And you see it's there, chromatic aberration. I'll turn that off. And now take a look at the green halo. We kind of even zoom into that more. See that green halo on one side and the purple halo on the other? That is chromatic aberration. That is best way to describe it, it is imperfections in the lens. It is a result of the light rays wrapping around the subject and having a higher contrast brightness versus dark area, which is why you see it on these really harsh edges. That's where chromatic aberration shows up. And the way that those light rays refract inside of the lens. The better the lens, the less of this you should have. I think it's safe to say you'll probably never completely eliminate it optically. It's just a nature of optics, but in software, we can reduce or eliminate that completely. So that's a combination of things. Good quality lens and software will combine to remove it completely. And in this case, I have turned off the chromatic aberration, so we're control, so we're actually seeing the way it came out of the camera. And this was a good lens, not the greatest lens in the world, but I mean, it's that 14 mil, it's a pretty good lens. But we're still getting some, but as I turn that chromatic aberration off, there we're seeing that, and you can see how that is all gone in there. So that is a really big part of what these optics modules can do for us. So it really is quite a big deal to do that. If I zoom out of this, let's go all the way out. I think on this image, we're going to see some pretty good vignetting differences as well. Yep, so let me go back to the full without the geometry correction, so you can see the distortion correction that's happening here as I toggle that back and forth. And you can also see the vignetting quite prominently on this image. So here, this is the original. We're seeing quite a lot of vignetting all the way around it. Let go of it, and the tonality across the image really does flatten out and it looks much more neutral. And in that case, of course, if you want the vignette, you can dial that back, but this allows you to have more of a true starting point, if you will. Another thing that this will do, what the software does and the DxO modules will do, has to do with lens sharpness. So we see that category here, lens sharpness. And I'm going to load up this photo for this. Now here's an interesting thing. You'll notice next to lens sharpness, it shows this little eye with the line through it. It's telling you that you can only be seeing it when you're zoomed at higher than 75%. And really you should be viewing it at 100% to get the true effect of what the lens sharpness is. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom into 100%. And we see this photo is absolutely tack sharp. We can just see every little hair of his eyelash, every little bit of paint on his face in here, absolutely crystal clear sharp. If I zoom in even farther, you can see how that looks great. If I turn off the lens sharpness, it's minor, but there is a difference. And let's go into a 200% and just show it a little bit more. Again, you should be looking at sharpness at 100%. I'm going into 200 because over go to webinar, things get a little bit soft, and this will make it a little bit easier to see. But as I toggle this on and off, you can see a notable difference in the sharpness in there. And that is another part of that optics module. All of these things have their default automatic settings, but you can always go in and you can change it. If you wanted to increase it, for example, and that, you can definitely dial this in too far, and that definitely looks way too sharp. It's over sharpened, you can tell, but you do have the control in there if you want it. But if you leave it at the default, basically at its auto settings, then it is going to look absolutely fantastic. So that's what your optics modules are doing for you. They're handling chromatic aberration. They're handling distortion around the edges. They're handling sharpness. They're also handling color. It's about the color rendering and trying to get back to as true of a source color, true of an original color, if you will, that you can possibly get. And that is what the optics modules do for you. So with that, there's a couple of questions that have popped up. So let me grab these real quick and then let's see. Oh, okay, there's no questions. It's, we're talking about the upgrade price. Okay, thank you, Lori. We've got the upgrade prices in here. So PhotoLab Essentials 5 is $139 on its own. It is free with the Nik Collection purchase. So $149 or free with Nik Collection. PhotoLab 5 Essentials Edition is $139. It does not include the Nik Collection. So, I mean, if you're thinking about buying it, you're better off spending $10 more buying the Nik Collection and getting you can look at it as you're getting the PhotoLab for $139, and for $10 more, you're getting the Nik Collection, or flip it around and say you're getting a $139 piece of software for free. So up to you. There are a variety of different upgrade possibilities. I've got a note on my screen right now saying there's 6 different scenarios depending on what version you have and so on. So again, just go to the website. There's a link that's on my page, so I'm assuming it's on yours as well. That Lori's dropped that in there so that you can check out the upgrade pricing. Okay, with that, I thought I'd seen a question pop in, but I guess not. With that, well, let's move on to organizing your photos. Let me turn off my camera again, go back to the photo library, and let's talk about file organization. So first of all, you'll notice over here on the left a list of my Finder. This is just looking at my computer. It's my devices, my hard drives, all my folders, and so on. That's what this is. So you are basically looking at a view of your hard drive, where some apps like Lightroom have their own database, or have maybe a mix of a database and their own library. Looking at the Finder, some apps are entirely database driven, like Apple Photos, whereas PhotoLab is primarily looking at the images in your Finder, although there is a little bit of a database category, and we'll come to that, where you can do your own custom structure. But the primary way to work is meant to be just looking at what is in the Finder. So however you organize photos in the Finder, you're going to find them that way in here. So just to kind of drive that point home, let's hide the camera again. So these photos here, let me go ahead and actually, where is it on this collection? So there it is. So you can see it highlighted down there. So there it is. It's in a folder called Photos. Let me go ahead and reveal this in the Finder here. And let's just go to List View. And within here, I'm going to create a new folder. And as soon as I do, you notice that it's, there's my untitled folder that is immediately popped up in here. Untitled folder. Let's just name it, more photos, and boom, there it is. There is that name showing up there. So whatever you do in the Finder is reflected immediately over in PhotoLab. So that's really kind of it as far as structure of your actual photos go in the Finder. Now, to make it easier to get to them instead of having to dig in through like I just did in here, there is, if we scroll up, here we go. let's see, devices, shared favorites here. So there is this favorites category, and let me kind of collapse this down a little bit. And you'll see there's quite a lot in my favorites. The way that you add something to favorites on Mac OS is to go over here and simply add that folder to the sidebar. So you'll see that my sidebar here mimics this. So if I go up a level to my photos folder and I add this into my sidebar, there we go. As soon as that's added there, you see it show up here, and that makes it easy to get to that particular folder of photos. On Windows, it's a little bit different. I've got this running on a PC that I'm screen sharing over here on the Mac. You don't have that same favorites. There is a Windows favorites. I gotta be honest, I'm not a Windows user. I don't know how to, I tried. I don't know how to add things to Windows favorites, but if you know how to add things to Windows favorites, those will show up there. Otherwise, it is just this flat structure in here. You do have another advantage in Windows though that's kind of interesting. I can actually right click in here and create folders directly from within the within PhotoLab inside of the Windows Explorer. So there I just added that new folder in there. And I suppose if I go in here and say reveal, where is that? Open in Windows Explorer, we're going to see that folder that I just created in there. I can't act, but says, you see that mirroring over here. You can't actually do that on Mac, and I think that's a permissions. It's a Mac OS permissions things. I just don't have the ability to control the Finder from here. So, it's horses for courses. You got one way doing it one way and another doing it another. But that is essentially the difference there in the file organization. Okay, so again, we are basing our organization off of whatever's in the Finder. How I put it in the Finder is how it shows up here. But as I inferred, there is actually a way to have a custom kind of a custom project, a custom database that you can build inside of PhotoLab to access your photos. And to do that, we build something called a project. So you can see down here, there's this little projects drop down. There's nothing in it right now. I'm going to select these 3 photos here. These 3, right click on these and choose create a project from the current selection. And we'll call this India. And now I have a project here called India, and that shows up in there. Now I can add photos from any folder to this collection, and they don't have to be in the same folder in the Finder. And that's the real advantage of this. So if I've got photos scattered all across different folders on my hard drive, and I want to bring them into one place within PhotoLab, that's where projects come in. If you think about it from the perspective of a trip like this, then there's probably not much sense in combining photos from different folders. However, if you wanted to have my highlights from the trip, which are living in different folders in the Finder because, I don't know, maybe you organize your photos by day. Every day you have a new folder full of photos. Totally logical way to do things. But then you want to have a collection of your favorites from the trip. Perfect way to do that. You make a project, favorites from India, and then you drag the individual photos that you want in there. So those can be mixed and matched, combined. Now the way that we can go, let's actually go ahead and add another photo to this. I'm going to use a search, and I'm going to come to the search in just a moment and how this is done. But if I search for photos that have the file name India in them, there's one that I've renamed to have India. Most of them don't. But if I drag that in there, then that shows up. And if I look in this folder or in this project, now we see the photos from different folders all showing up in one place in there. And if I want to get rid of any of these, I can right click on one and choose to remove that, and it's going to show me up here. The original images will not be removed from the disk, so this is just removing it from the project, so that's good to know. And the same thing happens if I right click on the project and I say delete. It says, do you really want to delete the selected projects from the database? That is just the project, it is not the photos. If I go back into my photos folder, there's the photos still there. Now let's go back into the last part of this, which is the indexing and searching. Whenever you click on a photo for the first time, PhotoLab will index it. That basically means that it scans the folder, analyzes all the photos in there, looks at all their metadata, and adds that to a database that it can quickly search. That will happen automatically whenever you click on a folder. So any folder that I click on that has photos, that's going to happen. However, if you have, let's say you've got a folder called, My Photos, and within that you have tens or hundreds or even thousands of subfolders in there full of photos, you would have to click on each individual folder that actually contains photos for it to scan, which obviously would take forever, and it's not a good way to scan your photos. So there is a manual process to scan the folder, to index the folder. Instead of it happening, again, automatically every time you click on a folder, but instead of waiting for that to happen, you can force it to happen for a folder in all of its subfolders. And that's really easy to do. You just go up to here where it says index a folder, click on that, and then find that folder in your on your computer. So let's say I wanted to go to my pictures folder. I click open, and it is going to scan that, and you might have seen up here it flashed by. It had actually already scanned it, so it was very fast, but that would scan and you'd see a little progress up there while it scans through. So what is the advantage of doing that? Well, it's searching. So let's go up here and search. When I do a search up here, it is only able to search what it has indexed. So again, this is why you might want to manually index a folder that has subfolders full of photos in it. But let's go ahead and do a search in here. I said that I shoot a lot of Lumix, so I'll type in Lumix in here. And now, to be fair, this you're only seeing a few results because this system does not have my entire photo collection, just a handful of photos that I use for demos. But in here, we'll see by typing in Lumix, it's showing me different potential matches and how many photos it's found. So apparently there's none with the IPTC metadata of Lumix, but there are some with the XF metadata of Lumix. There's no folders called Lumix, but there are photos shot with this camera here, which is probably an S5. Unfortunately, that window's not quite wide enough to show the full name. And then also different lenses, different Lumix lenses. So somewhere Lumix has appeared in any one of these. If I click on one like this here, that's going to show me the 2 photos, which might live in different folders, and I'm quite sure that these do, that match that search result. You can do things in here like search, let's say I type in the number 5, just the number 5. Well, am I searching IPTC data for 5? Am I searching for star ratings of 5? Keywords that have the number 5 in them, an aperture of f5, a 5mm lens, a 1/5 of a second, a 5-second exposure, a camera with the 5 in the number. All these different options in here that match will show up. And as you type in whatever you want in here, your possible matches are going to show up. So if I say, show me just my 5-star photos, then we see some 5-star photos. Just my little baby. So that's how that works. And again, once you've indexed it, they show up in there. They are able to be found, and you have a recent searches down here. So you can see, if I go back to like this lens one that I searched on, we'll see that showing up there as a recent. So that is how the whole organization part works. So again, organizing is through the Finder, just viewing it in here. So you're not actually organizing primarily in PhotoLab. You're doing that in the Finder and then viewing it in here, but you do have the ability to organize in projects, and you do have the ability to search through as much of your hard drive as you want to. All you have to do is index it first using the controls up here. So with that said, I'm seeing there are still no questions, which is just wild, no questions today. So we're going to move on. Next thing we're going to do is talk about the HSL tool. Specifically, I want to talk about color using this image here. So the tool specifically we're going to focus on is this one here called HSL. And again, this is just a tip of the iceberg of what you can do inside of PhotoLab. I just want to show you one of the newer, cooler tools relating to color in here. If you look at this photo, it is primarily, the primary colors in here are red. We've got the red onions. We've got this kind of reddish pink basket. There's another one over there, but then there's a few other colors popping up. There's a yellow from the basket. There's green on this basket. There's this big green wall back here. There's a bit of blue on his basket, his pants on here, his turban. So there's a bit of different colors in here, but the primary one is red. Now for this photo, I love the blue accents in there and the red little basket and so on, but the green to me is a little bit distracting. So when I look at a photo like this, I think, I want to scale back the green, maybe desaturate that a little bit, and then amplify the reds. And this is where the HSL tool really, really shines. So again, not diving super deep into the HSL tool. We've actually done webinars that are 100% about this tool. So I encourage you to check those out if you want to know more about this. But just to give you the basic overview, the HSL tool stands for hue, saturation, and luminance, and allows you to control individually the hue, saturation, and luminance of every, color or hue on the photo. First of all, let's start with the channel. Up here, this channel, what it really basically means is kind of a preset color range that you want to affect. You want to affect the aquas, the dark blues, the purples, the magentas. You want to affect the oranges, the reds, and so on. But these are totally customizable. That's just a default preset. I can say, I want to expand and control a larger range of color. Or I want to grab an eyedropper and say, I want to control that exact range of color. And in fact, let's narrow that down a little bit and really just control that area right there. Or in my case, what I want to do is affect the greens. So I click on the green, it jumps over to show me this band of green that I want to affect, that I've chosen. And now I can change the saturation, luminance, or uniformity. We're definitely not getting into that today, but that's a big topic. We're going to adjust the saturation of the greens. And if I take it down just a little bit, you can see those greens starting to get a little bit less saturated, a little desaturated, a little bit grayer up there in the corner. If I take it all the way down, then suddenly it goes black and white. I don't want to do that. I want to make it just be a little bit less competitive with the reds. Now let's do the reds. I can click on a color that I think is most close to it and make the adjustments, or grab that eyedropper and make it a bit more accurate and really isolate to that particular range. And in this case, I'll take the saturation of those up a little bit, maybe take the luminance down, make it a little bit darker. When colors get darker, they tend to be richer. So we'll just kind of dial that a little bit, like how that looks. And now if I do a comparison, you can see the difference there between the saturated green and the less saturated red versus the more saturated red and the less saturated green. And so you can really compare those two. And in fact, let's just do the HSL back and forth, so you're not seeing the vignetting and the other corrections happening as well. And so it gives you just an immense amount of control over the specific colors. Really, really cool. Let me do another photo. Same basic idea, but in this one, we're going to get a little bit more precise. I want to enhance the pink on the walls up here. So once again, I will enable the tool. Let's does not matter which one of these chips you start with, but I'm going to go ahead and start with one that kind of looks like it might be that color. But then I'm going to grab that eyedropper and click up there and grab that range of pink. Cool. And now let's take the saturation on that up and pull the luminance down on that a little bit, make it a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated. And you can really start to see the pink showing through in the wall up here. Again, as I toggle this on and off, you can really see that starting to pop through. Now it is getting maybe a little bit too much. Let's back this off. It's a little bit too fake. Let's kind of back that down. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Really makes that pink show up. Now it's funny, when I was preparing this demo for this photo, I saw the bottom of her foot there and I thought, oh man, it's like I did something here that really made her foot go out of whack. But then I realized, no, it's actually, we zoom into this and I turned off the correction, her foot is stained, it's dyed, so she must work with dyeing clothes or something, because her foot has that color on it. So don't think that that's an anomaly. That is actually there in the photo. But what I do want to do is back out of this and point out that while I made the pink enhanced up here, we actually are seeing a little bit of it down here in the foreground. Now that obviously tells us that the color that's here also exists in these steps. But, you know, maybe I can isolate this out a little bit. So if I toggle this on and off, we can definitely see, just focus on the steps, we can definitely see where that is showing up in there. And I don't want it to show up now. I may not be able to eliminate it completely, but I can probably eliminate it a little bit. So I want to spend a few minutes showing you what I would consider to be quite an advanced tip with the HSL tool, an advanced method of isolating a very specific color range. I've done this in demos before, and I've spent a lot more time in other demos. So again, if you want to know more about this, please do watch one of the webinars that is specifically about HSL. But I want to give you kind of a rapid fire look at this just to really drive the point home of what you can do with this tool. So let's go in here, and the first thing I'm going to do is narrow the range of the colors that are being affected. So just ignore the photo for now. I'm going to narrow the range of the colors that are being affected. The way that this little wheel thing here works is, let me just reset. I'll just reset everything in here so that there's no confusion. There we go. The way this wheel works is this inner edge of the wheel is the hue range that is going to be affected. So in this case, it's a very narrow band of green. If I drag this all the way out, then we're saying affect everything from green to red. The outer ring is the same thing, except that it is a feathering. So if I was to do this, then there would be no feathering at all. So basically whatever I did to the image would stop. It'd be a hard stop at this green right here before it moves on to the next hue, which is almost never going to look good. If you have a hard stop in there, it's going to look very fake. It's going to look like it was processed badly. This allows me to feather that off, to say whatever a change I make at 100%, make this change 100% up to here. And then at this point, I want it to start fading off. So here the effect stops, here the effect starts to stop. That would be the correct way. It begins the end from here and then fades off to 0% here. And you can make that a really smooth transition out, or you can make it no transition at all. So to kind of reiterate what this is doing, let me select this kind of saffron color of her sari there. And I'm going to actually really narrow this down. Just really, really narrow this down to a very narrow range and grab that color. Okay, it's automatically expanding out. I'm actually going to constrict this so there's no feathering, and then I will desaturate that. So you can see in here, zoom into 100%. Oh, I just messed that up. Sorry. Hand this back over and grab that again. There we go. And take that feathering all the way down. Take that feathering all the way down. There we go. So now, I am messing up the mouse. There we go. Come on, you. We want it to go there. It doesn't want to do a hard edge. There we go. Now we can see it. So now if you look at the edges, the zooming into a 200%, you can see it's a very hard edge in here. If I did want to desaturate that color in there, you can see it's very hard on and off. But as I start to expand this out, we get some softening in there. And as if I expanded this range out in there, we would allow this kind of to soften. There's a good spot. If I take that, really soften that out, you can see how it starts to fade in. So if that was the effect I was trying to do, that becomes more realistic looking than when it's at a hard edge. Okay, so now that we know that, I can use that knowledge to help me isolate the color, turn that off so I don't mess that up again, the color that is this pink wall. So let's go back to 100% in here, and let's go back to 100% in here. And actually, I'm going to zoom out fit to fill. I think that'll work better. Let's go like 75%. There we go. So again, I'm trying to isolate the pink in there. So let me grab the eyedropper and grab that pink. And then I'm going to narrow my feathering down, and I'm going to totally desaturate it. And this allows me to see exactly what range in here includes this pink wall. And if I expand this out, so now notice I'm not expanding the feathering, I'm expanding the base range of what is being selected. We can see in there, now as I drag this back and forth, look at the photo, look at the wall, and see how more of it is black and white and then less of it is. And if I make it really narrow, all we're gonna get is little splotches of black and white in here. So what I'm trying to do is find a place that gets the majority of that wall, but it's not just that. I want the majority of that wall and as little of this as possible. And so that's the trick right now. I'm trying to find a range in here that is going to represent as much of that back wall and as little of the foreground as possible. And right there, we've pretty well got it. I don't want to rotate the hue. This little tool here will actually rotate the hue, which I don't want to do, so that's why I reset it. If I drag the saturation up and down right now, we can see that we are primarily getting that back wall. We're getting a little bit of the steps as well, but we are primarily getting the back wall, and that is my goal in there. So if I wanted to increase the saturation on that, and then let's feather it out so that it does look more natural. And now the primary pink is happening up here. It's less happening here on the steps. And I might even be able to restrict that in just a little bit more. So that's the idea behind this tool. You have this really clever and creative way of selecting a color range. And by using the tools that are designed to isolate a range to correct, you can use them to find the range that you want to do whatever it is you're doing to by restricting the feathering of it, totally desaturating it so it really stands out from the rest of the image, and then adjusting it until you have isolated just the part you want. And then feather it out to make it a little bit softer, a little more natural, and do the actual work that you want, not desaturating it to zero, but adding some saturation, some brightness, some darkness, whatever it is you want to do. So just a little bit of an advanced tour into that tool. Again, definitely tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to it, but I wanted to show you that while we're here. Okay, next up, we're going to look quickly at repairing. So let's go to this photo here. And on this photo, I didn't have a good photo that actually needs retouching handy here. So what I decided to do this with, because it does work quite well for the demo, is let's just say I wanted to get rid of these birds. Simple little retouch, I want to get rid of the birds in here. So I'll show you the retouching tool that we have. There's a little Band-Aid up here. Click on that. It brings up the retouching tool. You can also find that over here in the palette, but this is a shortcut to it. This opens up a control down here that shows you two different modes for your work. You can do a repair mode or cloning mode. So cloning is, if I wanted to make duplicates of the birds, then I would clone them from one spot to another. Sometimes cloning used to be the only way to do retouching, but of course we have advanced beyond that now. We now have repair tools, but cloning can be used for retouching if you need it to. But for actual retouching, we're probably going to use repair the most of the time. And what repair will do is create new pixels based off of the surrounding pixel area. And let's just start with getting rid of this little bird right there. I'm going to hide my little pink highlight around the mouse right now. So I'm just hiding that so that you can see more clearly the actual, the actual kind of aqua colored ring that is my retouching area. As I adjust the size, you see the area, the size of that brush is changing. And as I adjust the feathering, you'll see the feathering changing. So if I make this really big with zero feather, that is my retouching brush. And if I click on something, it's going to sample from another area and it's going to have this really hard edge to it. Probably not going to look very realistic. We're probably going to see that hard edge. In fact, if I just, I'll just click here in the clouds and let me turn on the mask so we can see what it has selected. So if I drag this down to here, you can see that it has done this repair. And it actually, even with the hard edge, it still looks reasonably good, but you can tell something's missing in there. So if we were trying to retouch this part of the cloud, we would probably want to have a softer edge on there to make it look more realistic. So let me delete that. And let's go in and make a reasonable size brush to get rid of the birds in here. So let's make that a bit smaller. Add a bit of feathering. You don't need a crazy amount, but we'll add a bit of feathering in there. And then you have your opacity. Do you want to be able to see through? So maybe if you're trying to retouch skin, you might want some of the original texture to show through. Whereas here with the sky, I don't want to see any of the original bird. I want that completely gone. So I want my opacity at 100%. So let's go ahead and just click on there. And it's kind of funny because the default position that it happened to grab actually included the other bird in there. So we got rid of one bird and cloned the other one. Not what I want. So I'll move this over here. And now you can see, let's go and zoom in a little bit closer here. Now we can see that, back in, that we have sampled to retouch this area from this area here, and the bird is gone. Do the same thing for this one. It grabs that area and the bird is gone. If we hide the masks, it's totally gone in there. Let's go to another part of it. Let's go to the bigger bird up here. Go back into the retouching again. Now I can do this a couple of different ways. I probably am going to want to make this a little bit softer because of the big soft clouds around it. I can just click, right? But that obviously just does part of it. Let me undo that or show the masks, select that and delete it. I can make the brush bigger and make sure it covers the whole bird. Like I'm gonna have to get pretty big in here to get that whole bird. And that might, you know, you see areas in front and behind the bird that we don't really need to get rid of. So instead what I can do is paint with it. So I'll go in here and I'll say, let's just kind of paint over this area there. And that is now created a sample the same size and shape, which I can sample from. And it automatically chooses a spot that it thinks is going to work best. If you don't like it, you can move it. But you see what happens if I move it up here, this starts to get dark and you can start to kind of see, well, something has happened there because we didn't sample from the best spot. Whereas if I choose an area that is similar color, then it becomes believable and you don't see any remnants of that at all. So that's kind of a basic of the retouching in here. As you do your brushing in here, it is going to automatically create a shape that matches that. It is going to automatically choose a location that it thinks works. And if you want to change that location, you enable show masks and then you see the actual masks. And if you want to get rid of one, just hit the delete key and away she goes. And that's pretty much all there is to that. I see we do actually have a question coming up in here. Let's turn this back on and see. Greg has asked for my opinion, PhotoLab versus Lightroom. I mean, very different tools, of course, but you're asking me on a DxO webinar, so it's a little bit of a loaded time to be asking that question. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. Let's start with one of the big ones, the cost. You are paying a monthly subscription fee for the Adobe products, which is a bit unfortunate. I know a lot of people are not very happy about that. And that can get pretty expensive. So definitely significant cost savings in here. Lightroom does have some pretty cool AI stuff. Not gonna lie, they got some pretty cool AI tools in there. But when it comes to optical corrections, you're gonna find, I think, a better result out of PhotoLab. When it comes to noise reduction, oh, now you're getting into the big stuff. Now, we'll see at the end when we do a comparison of PhotoLab Essentials to PhotoLab Elite. Specifically within the Elite edition, you have access to the prime noise reduction, which is mind-blowing noise reduction. If you've never seen that, you can take photos that were shot at 6400, 12,800, 56,000 ISO and make them look just almost pristine, just removing so much noise. It's really, really incredible tool. So there's definitely advantages and disadvantages to both. You know, I think if you're really trying to compare the two, outside of cost, optical corrections and noise reduction and so on, look for a comparison of feature list on the web and see if you can find one that shows, you know, everything feature for feature. Again, you know, advantages and disadvantages to both for sure. Bob says, is there a way to limit colors affected by HSL to a small region of the image instead of the entire image? Unfortunately, it is not. So looking for a way to maybe brush an area or say only affect this spot of it. That is not there. That is a common feature request though. So, you know, I have no idea. Maybe we'll see that in a future version, but for right now, there is no way to do that. Okay, now let's go to the next part, which is, where are we? Repairing we did. Oh, now we get into the Nik Collection component. Okay. Turning this off, I'm going to go to this photo here that we started with. And let's actually select the right photo. I guess I should get out of my retouching. There we go. And I'm going to do a little bit of very quick basic work to this, and then I'm going to take this into the Nik Collection because, and I do this really just to point out, you don't go to the Nik Collection first. The Nik Collection, if you're not familiar with it, is a series of tools to do largely effects, some creative work, some corrective work, but largely creative work. So whether you're doing black and white corrections, you're doing old film looks, you're doing some really detailed color enhancements, those all happen in the Nik Collection. However, before you send the image to the Nik Collection, you do want to do your basic adjustments. Your raw processing is happening at the raw level, which is here in PhotoLab, not in the Nik Collection. When we go send our photo over to Nik, we are converting it to a TIFF before it moves into there. So we need to do our raw processing first. So that's recovering your highlights, doing any noise reduction you might want to do, doing cropping. Great idea to do your cropping before. You don't have to, and I can actually show you. You can kind of go back and forth, but you do want to do the majority, especially of your corrective work, especially of things that would take advantage of the raw file. Again, highlights, noise, those kind of things are all raw based, that you want to do that first. So with that in mind, I'm going to start with this photo here, which has nothing done to it, I believe. Yep, this is totally reset. And let's do a quick little bit of straightening. So I'm going to go up here to the, oops, where is it? Go to the right tool in here. Oh, yes, right here. Horizon. We're going to go turn on the horizon tool. And you'll notice when I turn it on, it just immediately straightened it perfectly. It runs in auto when you turn it on. Now, if it didn't work right or you don't like the way that it did it, if you enable the tool in here, you get this line, and then you can line that up on any horizontal line or vertical line. So if I wanted to align this off of something that was vertical, like let's say that was a center arch in there, I could align it that way. It's not a center arch, so I need to align it based off the horizontal line. And so I would say, let's drop that in right about so. That looks pretty good. Apply that, and boom, that is straightened out. Cool. Then you've got cropping. I have an auto crop is turned on right now, which is kind of interesting. If I turn off the auto crop, notice the edges here, how we're seeing these. Let me turn my little thing back on. There we go. You see this black edge in there. That's because the photo has been rotated. And of course, when you rotate it, well, you're going to end up with black edges. And so what the crop does automatically is crops past that. You can do that manually, of course. You can take over that if you want to. So let's open up the crop tool, and I'm actually going to crop unconstrained. So you can, constrain by any aspect ratio you like, including the aspect ratio of the original photo. But I'm going to go unconstrained and do a kind of very wide cinematic type of a crop to this. Let's go super wide on there. Cool. All right, so that's it. That's all I want to do in here. There's my base image. Actually, I lied. I'm going to do a little bit of, let's do a little bit of shadow darkening and bring up the midtones just a touch. Okay, there we go. That's how I wanted to leave it. All right, with that done, now let's go into the Nik Collection. To do that, we have a dedicated button here called the Nik Collection. You click on that. And before you jump into any of the plugins, you'll want to check the settings. If we look at the settings in here, you have a variety of choices. First of all, the action, export as JPEG, TIFF, or without processing. So do you want to convert this to a JPEG or a TIFF before you send it to the Nik Collection? I honestly can't think of any scenario where you really would want to do it as a JPEG, so we're just going to ignore that and go straight on export as a TIFF. Now this one to export the selected files without processing, if I chose that and I choose a raw file, it's not going to work because you can't send a raw file over there, but we are going to come back and use this in a little bit. Do I want to resize my image? If I do, I would enable that. I don't. I want to leave it at the full size. Watermarking, you don't actually have watermarking in the Essentials version as part of the Elite version, but if you had watermarking enabled, then you could actually override that to say no watermarks. You don't accidentally get a watermark embedded in the photo that gets sent off to the Nik Collection. We'll leave the color profile as shot, and we're going to leave all the metadata intact. I don't want it to strip any of that out. So those are my settings. I'll just leave it at there. Now I'm going to choose a filter. I'm going to choose Silver FX Pro 3 because it's one of my personal favorites. And you'll see that it is rendering out a TIFF. It already happened. It was very quick, but it rendered out a TIFF in the bottom left corner. And here we are in the Nik Collection. Now, I'm not going to give you a full tour of these different apps. We've done a bunch of this before, but just to give you a very brief one, you have tons of presets in here on the left to choose from, and over on the right, a massive amount of control over that black and white image. And you can see if I just start to open all these different things, you have a ton of things that you can do. So you got film types, you have a clear view filter that is now part of the Nik Collection. This is new in Nik Collection 5. You have a ton of stuff in here. But this is not a Nik demo, so I'm just going to go over to my favorites, and I'm going to add this one here that I like called Cool Tones. Pretty cool, and I'm actually going to enhance this just a little bit. Let me take up my midtones, a hair on there, and maybe pull my highlights down just a little bit. All right, so I dig this look. It's this cool vintagey black and whitey kind of look. We've got this border, this frame that's been added to it and so on. So I like this, but is this really the right choice? I mean, at the end of the day, is this really the right thing? Maybe I'm going to play with it later. Maybe I'm going to change my mind later. I don't want to commit. Not ready to commit to this. So what you have in the Nik collection when working with TIFF files, remember this is a TIFF file, is an option to keep this as an editable file that you can come back and make changes to later, which normally can't happen in a TIFF. And this is actually a feature that was introduced in Nik 4, I think that's right, where this new type of a TIFF called a multi-layered TIFF file is created. What actually happens here, when I click OK, let's actually first show you where that checkbox is, non-destructive edit. It tells you it's going to be a larger file. You'll understand why in a second. I want to make sure that is on, so that is turned on. I'll click apply, and this is now creating that file. So what it's creating is this multi-layered TIFF where you have your original TIFF, the original color one that I hadn't touched. You have the new TIFF, that black and white file that I just created. And in between there, an invisible layer of metadata. That metadata in this case is instructions for SilverFX Pro that says how to get from here to here. If I reopen the same photo in the Nik collection, it is going to throw away that top layer, look at the instructions and reprocess the original layer just as if I had never left the Nik collection. That allows me to come back and make any changes at any time. I go, oh, my border was too small, all right, so I changed it. Too big. If I made a border too big, I want to make it smaller. If I had destructive editing happening, then there'd be no getting that back. But because there's non-destructive, because you're just looking at the instructions, that can all be redone. So now that I've done it on here, now that I have created that, there's my TIFF photo here, the TIFF version, the black and white version that is created in there. Now, if I go into the Nik collection filter tool again and jump in, I can go back to re-editing this. But before I do that, I want to show you kind of the power of combining the two tools and how this works. I'm going to make a change to this in PhotoLab, and I'm just going to do something that's really obvious that a change has been made. Let's see here. I'm going to go styling and put on a sepia toning on this. Okay, so you see it's got a sepia tone. So it's my same black and white photo with a sepia tone added inside of PhotoLab. But I look in this now and I'm like, you know what, that border, that was a bad idea. I shouldn't have put the border on there, and I've got too much grain in here. You know, I've added all this heavy grain, it's too much. But I love the sepia. You know, it took me hours to come up with a sepia tone, and maybe whatever other work I did, I'm not willing to get rid of that. So let's go ahead, got that photo selected, my TIFF file selected here. Go back to the Nik collection option. I'm going to go into settings and I'm going to change this to export the selected file without processing, which in this case will work because it's a TIFF. And now when I go into SilverFX Pro, we're going to see the sepia disappear, because remember, the sepia is not happening in SilverFX. That's happening back there in the background in PhotoLab. So now I can make changes to this. This is the original image. If I do a compare, we see back to the original. By the way, in SilverFX, when you click compare, you always see a completely neutral black and white original. You don't see the color, which is why we're not seeing it in color. But the full image is there. And I go, you know what? Let's do a totally different preset. Let's go for this high contrast harsh one. You see it doesn't have that grain in there. The border is gone. I like this one better. Let's go ahead and apply that. And I'm still leaving this non-destructive, so I can change my mind yet again. I'll apply that, give that a chance to render through, and now we're seeing that effect applied, but my sepia toning is still applied on top of it, which I can now toggle on and off. So you can combine the effects of the Nik collection with the effects of PhotoLab and go back and forth as many times as you want to, totally non-destructively. You just have to make sure when you jump into there that you make sure that you have enabled export selected files without processing, and that's the trick to that. So with that all said, I see there's a couple other questions to come up. We got about 5 minutes, so that's perfect. We're going to do that. And let's just go into the questions. Let's see. And then I'm going to pull up a comparison at the end of the two versions. Andrea says, how do you fix, she has in quotes, the film strip in PhotoLab to the bottom of the main window that shows a selected image? Mine vanished when I upgraded. Oh, okay. I can bring it up, but I can't make it stay. Well, it should stay. But here's what you're talking about. You said in the at the bottom, you didn't specify which view. Okay, so here's what we're talking about. In the photo library view and the customized view, you have different views of this bar down here. So this bar can be scaled up and down to show your images. In the customized view, it is designed to show what we'd call a film strip. It's a single row of the images in there. And as I make that smaller or larger, the thumbnails get smaller or larger. But oh, it disappeared. Where'd it go? Well, it collapses. If you get too small down there, it collapses down to the bottom. So you just got to bring your mouse down to the bottom of that window so it changes. You can see it changes to the that little up arrow cursor, and then you can drag that up and make that as big as you want. Same idea happens over in the photo library. In the photo library, I can make this as big or small as I want. Now it's a little bit different here because the thumbnails aren't automatically changing size. They're not a single row. You can have a grid of these. So I can make larger thumbnails in a grid or smaller ones, make that a little bit smaller. You have control over that. Now that should stay sticky. That is not meant to change as I switch back and forth between modes. It should remain where you had last put it, even through restart. So Andrea, if when you're doing this and you quit and come back, it's disappearing, then I would recommend trashing the preferences. Go into your preferences, look for the DxO PhotoLab prefs, and just trash it and start the preferences over. It sounds like there's a corrupt preferences file because these kind of savings are saved in flags within the preferences, and if it's corrupt, it just keeps ticking back to the wrong way, then that's probably what would happen. But that's how you change it, and if it's not sticking, then it sounds like a preferences issue. Andrea also says, do you use Clearview in Nik rather than in PhotoLab? Assuming that you're going to Nik. Great question. So Clearview, I mentioned in the when I was diving into Nik Collection that Clearview is a new capability inside of some of the Nik Collection filters. Do you want to do it in PhotoLab or in the Nik Collection? There's no easy answer to that. I think I would probably do it in the Nik Collection most of the time because it's quite dramatic. It can be quite dramatic, right? If we go back to, let's go back to this. Actually, let's do, we'll do a different photo. Let's do something with the clouds. Let's go to this one. It's kind of a fun, long exposure photo in here. And let's go to Clearview, which is, where is that? Is it detail? I think it's under detail. Not under detail. I don't even know where this thing is. Color, accentration, style, toning, exposure, compensation, selective tone. I don't know. It's somewhere. Focusing, crop, local adjustment. Let's just go to this view and find it. Essentials. Oh wait, is Clearview? Clearview may not actually be part of. Right. Okay. Clearview is not part of the essentials. It's only part of the elite. So in that case, you only got one choice. But if you're in the elite version, you would see Clearview in there, which I think if I look at my Windows install, I'm pretty sure this is the elite version. So let's see, it's going to customize, see red eye repair, and I could even, it's probably under detail. I'm not even sure where it is. Let's do this. Clear. This is the full version. Clearview, DxO Clearview Plus. Yeah, that is only part of the Elite Edition. That's why it's not showing up in the other one. So here, by the way, this little ability to search is also something that's unique to the Elite Edition, which is quite frankly very, very handy. Anyway, back over to this. So in this case, you don't have a choice. If, however, so let's go ahead and take it into the set this back to TIFF, and I'll take it into Silver Effects. Here we go, and see what it does, and you're going to see it is very dramatic. And so because it's so dramatic, I think that it is probably a better idea to do it at the creative stage of the photo editing, which of course would be in Silver Effects Pro or in whichever tool you are working in. So let's see, where there's Clearview. If I crank this up, you can see it's adding a ton of micro contrast to this. This is a little bit on the dark side. Let's brighten it up a little bit. Grab that slider, brighten that up. You can see there's a huge amount of texture that is being added in here. And I think that it would be wise to do that while you're also working on your grain and shadow detail and whatever else you're doing. So I would probably do it here. Long-winded answer to a simple question. All right, now let's take a look at the difference between the two. Let me find that web page that I had opened up. Here it is. So you're also getting this web page right about now in your chat window. It's what are the differences between the two editions of PhotoLab. So you see in here everything you get in Essentials and what you also get in Elite. So things like multiple activation. So if you want to install the same system, same software on multiple systems, you can. Your DxO Prime and Deep Prime noise reduction, absolutely huge. Fujifilm support, because it's this whole new part of the decoding engine that is exclusive to the Elite Edition. So if you're shooting Fuji, then you do need to go to there. There's that Clearview Plus. You've got that watermarking, anti-moire, customizable palettes. So all these palettes over here that we're messing around with, all of these can be customized in the the larger version. The filtering of the tools, battery naming, selective metadata, copy and paste. So that's kind of a cool new feature, copying and pasting metadata from one image to a bunch of others. DCP color profile support, some more color profile work. If that matters to you, then that support is there. Color rendering profiles as well, multiple exports, allowing you to save and export multiple types of images at once, preset editor, partial presets creation, and IPTC editing, which is a new feature as well. So quite a lot that is in the Elite Edition, but as you can see, there's a ton of stuff in the Essentials Edition on its own. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that brings us to the end of our show today. So thank you again. I want to reiterate, if you do want to, if you decide to make a purchase or an upgrade, please use that website right there, photojoseph.com/getDxO. If you missed any part of this webinar, it will be up on DxO's YouTube channel, usually within about a week or so you can watch out for that up there. If you missed any of it or you just want to watch it again, I will also be putting it on my website once it goes up there. And I guess that's about it. So thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate your time today. I will see you, I think in September, I believe we're taking next month off of these. So with that said, take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.